Hello, welcome to European Open Briefing for Wednesday, September the 5th. I'm Rafi Boyajan, currency analyst at xm.com, and we're going to be taking a look at what's happening in the currency markets today. So there doesn't seem to be much change in the market sentiment this morning. We're still seeing quite a lot of risk off. Equities are actually sharply down again. The dollar is holding firms, and apart from those trade tensions, we do have turbulence in emerging market economies, namely Turkey and Argentina, and we're now seeing some contagion which is affecting the South African rand, the Brazilian real, as well as the Indonesian rupiah. So market sentiment is definitely in risk off mood. We've got the resumption of NAFTA talks later on today. If there's some positive outcome there, that could perhaps shift the market sentiment. We also have that September 6th deadline for the public comment period for the 200 billion worth of tariffs on Chinese imports, and we could possibly hear a decision on whether or not those tariffs will go ahead by President Trump later this week. The Canadian dollar has slumped to 6.5-week low ahead of the resumption of the talks between the US and Canada, and we are seeing European currencies struggle as well. The euro failed to hold above the $1.16 level. It's now fallen to around 1.1558. Sterling is also struggling. It's currently trading around 1.2824. We did hear some reports yesterday that the EU could soften its stance on the Irish border issue, but that didn't really provide much relief to the UK currency. The Australian dollar had been having pretty strong start earlier in Asian trading. It did fall back higher later on as market sentiment remained downbeat. We saw Australian GDP growth beating expectations and briefly lifting the Aussie, and that also briefly lifted the New Zealand dollar, but both are currently down at the moment and touching fresh lows. As far as the Kiwi is concerned, we also did see a drop in dairy prices yesterday, which drove the currency to fresh 2.5-year lows. And looking at commodities, we can see gold prices marginally higher, perhaps still somewhat helped by the softer dollar we saw yesterday, and perhaps the dollar not rising quite as strongly as in recent days. Though against the yen, the dollar did rise to a near 1-week high. If you look at oil prices, they're reversing yesterday's gains. In fact, WTI crude is the worst performer here, mainly on that risk of mood. The dollar index at the top of the table. Having a closer look at the dollar index, it did rise to a 2-week high yesterday before falling back. It's now rising back towards those highs. So we've got, of course, the trade story, which is driving dollar demand. So that's basically the dollar is benefiting from safe haven flows, particularly as emerging market economies are being hit hard in recent days. On the one hand, we've got the Fed continuing to raise interest rates, as well as the trade tensions weighing on the growth outlook. So all of that is making the US dollar more attractive. The yen is also benefiting from safe haven demand, so that's somewhat capping dollar yen, though earlier on the dollar did manage to reach as high as 111.71. Also supporting the US currency, we did have the ISM manufacturing PMI yesterday rising to 14-year high in August, and we're going to have more data coming up as well this week. We've got the ISM non-manufacturing PMI out tomorrow, as well as the non-farm payrolls report for August on Friday. Looking at the Canadian dollar, which will be in focus this week, not just because of the resumption of the NAFTA trade talks, but we do have a Bank of Canada policy meeting later on today, where we could possibly see a signal for a rate hike for October. The loonie, though, we can see has fallen to 6.5-week lows. USD CAD rising to 6.5-week high of 1.3207. There doesn't seem to me to be too much optimism regarding whether or not as to we're going to have a deal this week. The Canadian Prime Minister said that he won't back down on the key issues. Still, there's still a chance we could see a deal by Friday, and that could help the loonie retrace some of its losses for this week. And quick look at the Australian dollar. It did rise earlier today. It's now fallen to a more than 2-year low, 0.7142, as there doesn't seem to be any let up in those trade worries. The Australian economy, though, is still isn't doing too badly. In fact, it's doing rather well. The economy grew by 0.9% in the second quarter, beating expectations of 0.7%. The annual rate picked up to 3.4%. That was the fastest in nearly 6 years, and we did see an upward revision to the prior quarter as well. Despite all that, though, the expectations of how soon the RBA will raise interest rates wasn't impacted by that data, so that didn't really help the Aussie that much, and also there are expectations that growth will slow in the second quarter, so all of that in fact is weighing on the Australian currency. Quick look now at what's coming up later on. We're going to have Eurozone retail sales and UK services PMI, and we've got that Bank of Canada decision at 14 hours GMT, plus a number of central bank speakers. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.